Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another virtual discussion of IFA. Many thanks for logging on when you have too many things going on. Prime Minister is yet to speak at the UN General Assembly, and then you have so many elections in India going on. And I cannot really thank my panelists more. They are the most eminent people suitable for discussion. We have Ambassador Meera Shankar. She has been on our program many times. She is a great supporter of IFA. She was ambassador in Germany and ambassador in USA, and a longer stint in Prime Minister's office under different government and different Prime Minister. And I know that she has been on various television channels and sharing her views and thoughts. What I like most about her is she is always very balanced, nuanced, sense, verbose or hype. So actually gives it a more realistic assessment. We have Mr. Arun Kumar Singh. He has been with RIFA for many years. 2 months back, he was one of the physical meeting with Professor Mahapatra at conference room 2 at IIC. He has finger everywhere. He was ambassador Israel, which is in the news all the time. Has been news for last 1 year, seemed to be law to itself. Then he was ambassador in France, where the president has got a prime minister whom he perhaps never wanted. But then he has been ambassador to USA and visiting professor to various universities. And he writes quite extensively. I read his article on Quad Hindustan Times just 3 days back. So welcome, Arun. Then Professor Mahapatra has been with us for almost since we started in IFA, all along. And he is a great friend. He has been, as you all know, that he was a faculty of SIS JNU from 1999 to 2022. He was rector. He has been heading what we call the American, Canadian, Latin American studies for many years. And he has been Tagore Chair in Yunnan University in China. And I'm told that he has visited most of the presidential libraries in USA for his research material. He has written many books, and one of the 2 main books which I would like to mention are the US Approach to Islamic World Post 9/11. And his most recent book, A Rise of the Indo-Pacific, Perspectives, Dimensions, and Challenges. And he is editor of the Indian Foreign Affairs Journal, which is publication of AID, and he serves on the editorial board of IDSA. He is also visiting professor of IMPRI, which is Impact and Policy Research Institute. So we will have Professor Mahapatra is always very unsparing and frank and robust, and sometimes unorthodox in his assessment, but we love to have him. Then for the first time, I special welcome to Captain Dr. Bansal, Alok Bansal, whom we never had earlier. We had honor of having Ram Madhavji quite a few times, so we are glad to have you. He is currently the director of India Foundation. He is also Secretary General of the Asian Eurasian Human Rights Forum, an organization accorded ECOSOC status by UNESCO. He has served in the Indian Navy for 32 years and participated in Operation Pavan Sri Lanka and commanded 2 warships. He is a veteran of a Trek to Dialogue. I see he has participated in Trek to Dialogues in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Iran, China, Israel. I don't think any other left. He was executive editor of Maritime Affairs and has been reviewing research papers slated for publication. He has written many books. Some prominent ones are Balochistan in Turmoil, Pakistan at Crossroad, Pakistan occupied Kashmir, the Untold Story, Sri Lanka, Search of Peace, via Afghanistan, the New Great Game, in Gwadar, China's Gibraltar. Ladies and gentlemen, I won't want to preempt the previous what our distinguished panelists are going to say. My limited understanding is that this election is still very open. 50 days is a long time in politics, anything can happen. Though the different polls are saying that Harris has an edge. I was reading that yesterday NBC and CBS News give 5 to 4 point advantage to Harris. And there is a historian, I think American University, I don't remember his name, is Alan Lesman. He is perhaps predicted 9 times right on 10 times. And he says Harris will beat Trump. We don't know. But fact is that since President Biden reluctantly shelved his ambition to seek re-election, Kamala Harris has united, energized, galvanized Democratic Party. You can imagine she has nearly 3/4 of $1 billion campaign fund at her disposal. She has more than 400,000 volunteers working for her. She is crisscrossing the country. So she is also projected her own image as a very responsible, mature, composed leader, which was visible in her last debate with Donald Trump, in which she not only killed him, but also perhaps demolished him. But many analysts think that in the US election is not popular vote which really counts. In spite of that supposed victory in the debate, she might have got barely half a point advantage. And unless he wins those swing state with Meera, Arun, no more, that Wisconsin, Georgia, Carolina, Arizona, unless he wins there, I don't know whether she still has a chance. But still, she has come nearest that any other person has come. And I personally feel that she has tried to move certain constituencies, like her abortion thing has endeared herself to many women, and her views on the healthcare and union and the middle class and small businesses also have the Hispanic community and the Black African American. She has really done a lot, but there are issues on which Trump, like immigration, the issue on which Trump really go on talking how all these people coming from different countries are taking away jobs and really will drag you out of your homes. And then recent ongoing conflict with Israel and Hamas on Gaza, now Lebanon, might really have some negative consequences for her. Trump is trying to create fear that if Jews, he's telling Jews, if you vote for her, you will have no Israel left. So let's see, a lot of things are going on. I'm reminded of a very rustic saying of a former minister of Bihar called Lalu Prasad ji. He once said, look, इसके लिलाट में होगा कोई prime minister बनेगा. That means that if you have a destiny, you come. So whether Trump or Kamala Harris, whomsoever destiny chooses will become the president. I will stop here now, and I will really request Professor Mahapatra to initiate the debate. Over to you, Professor Mahapatra. Unmute yourself. Yes.
Namaste and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Ambassador Kumar, for this opportunity to share the panel with such a distinguished set of people. And all of us who are part of this webinar are so much aware about what is going on in the US. There are news and views all around the world. And this is going to be one of the most fascinating and interesting elections. I would say that the elections in the US to select the next president of the USA has already started. There are quite a few states which have the policy of early voting, and some people have voted. And people in the outer space who are the astronauts, they are also going to vote. Some of the states have already sent their ballot by post, and some of them are going to cast their vote even before the 5th of November, when the elections are going to take place. On the 5th of November, the people who go to vote, they are not going to directly select either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. They are basically going to select the electors from their respective states, which are going to constitute the electoral college of 538 members, who ultimately are going to cast the vote on 5th of November. Now, having said that introduction, let me say that there are two questions which are dominating everybody's mind. Number one, whether the United States is ready for electing a woman president. Number two, if that woman happens to be an African American and Jamaican Indian ancestry, whether the American people are ready to vote for such a woman to be the next president of the USA and commander in chief of the United States of America. Whether the American people are comfortable with a woman candidate who became the nominee of the Democratic Party by default and did not come through the primary and caucus system of selecting the nominee of a particular political party. Then there are other people who are saying that whether Donald Trump, a person who had a very controversial 4-year term, is going to be elected yet again. The person who was hugging the dictators around the world, and later he himself acted like a dictator and wanted to undo the election outcome in 2020, whether the American people are going to vote for such a gentleman, whether the American people are ready to vote yet again for a person who has so many criminal charges against him. 4 cases are going on. In one case, he has already been convicted, and he has felony charges in numerous cases. And the person who apparently is narcissistic and who appears to be a megalomania, who has so many harsh words to talk about not only the rival candidate, but also the immigrants in very, very difficult and very inflammatory language, whether the American voters are going to elect such a person to be the president of the United States. Now, the question is, I mean, these are the questions. The answer is yes. Yes for both Kamala Harris as well as Donald Trump. And both have a chance to become the next president of the United States of America. Number one is Kamala Harris, very articulate, intelligent, and presidential in her campaigns. And all of us have seen that in the debate that took place with Donald Trump. She has very strong position on the abortion issue, pro-life or pro-choice. And many, many American women are likely to vote for Kamala Harris. After all, the American women voter turnout is very high. Last time it was 68%. And some of them, particularly the white American women who still support Donald Trump, large number of other women are likely to vote for Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris said, I don't know, we cannot verify it, that quite a few former members of the National Security Division of the United States, including the military officers, are against Donald Trump. Large number of Republican members, very respectable leaders in the respective states, different states, they are also against Trump and they have endorsed Kamala Harris. And as far as economy is concerned, although Donald Trump is saying that Joe Biden's economy was really bad, economy of the US during his term was excellent. The fact remains, at the moment, the American economy is doing much better than many, many developed countries. At the moment, the employment rate has come down. At the moment, the inflation rate has also come down, except the grocery prices in some of the states. And Kamala Harris has been able to put forth an economic plan, which is going to be, I'm using a strong word, pro-poor in the United States. At one time, I asked one of my students to do PhD on poverty in the US. And now when I look at the issues which are actually going to affect the middle class and the lower middle class Americans who can be considered poor, for example, food stamp, for example, Medicare, for example, student loan, for example, housing. In all these areas, Kamala Harris has come up with a plan, and that is going to actually appeal to the people who belong to the middle class. And the best thing about Kamala Harris is she says, I am going to be the president of entire America, not just for the Democrats, not just for the women, not just for the poor people and the middle class, for everyone. That was a very, very powerful stance she has been taking. So it is quite likely that Kamala Harris may actually win the election. Most of the national polls are suggesting that Kamala Harris is leading, but then national polls are not the great indicator. After all, the American people got another chance to elect a woman. Last time it was Hillary Clinton. She got majority of the votes nationally, but she lost in the electoral college and she lost the election. So although she has a chance to win, we never know. As far as Donald Trump is concerned, he's an extremely strong candidate. in spite of all the negative connotations that I explained just now, large number of Republican members, they support him wholeheartedly. And in spite of all his statements on all kinds of things, some of which are out and out lies, some of which cannot be verified, even then his support base is so strong. That is why there is a possibility that even Donald Trump may win the election. Now, there are 50 states and one District of Columbia in the USA, they are going to vote. Ladies and gentlemen, only 7 swing states are going to determine who will be the next president of the USA. More than 40 states are not going to have a say because traditionally, large number of states are either Democrat or Republican, and periodically for decades they have been voting for either a Democrat or a Republican. So these 7 states are very critical. And some of them are, for example, Georgia, then Arizona, then Nevada, then Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania. What is interesting is the African Americans who generally vote in large number for the Democrats, 1/3 of the African American population is one of the swing states, that is Georgia. The Latin American voters, in large number, they vote for the Democrats, and they dominate the demography in Nevada. Now, the Israel war against Hamas has become very controversial in the USA. Large number of young people, including those who traditionally support the Democratic Party, they are against Joe Biden's policy. Now, Arab Americans, as a demography, they live in large number in Michigan. So in these critical swing states where the voters are ultimately going to decide, these kind of minority populations are there. That is why whether Donald Trump can really carry all these people along with him is a big question mark. Just about a few hours ago, he went to New York, and in New York, he was appealing to the Latino votes and to the African American votes. But it doesn't seem that all these people are going to vote for them. So ultimately, when we say that who will be the next president, we cannot predict at all at this moment. Although the opinion polls in large number are saying different things, let us keep our fingers crossed, watch the development, how the American people, one of the oldest democracies in the world, are going to vote for their next president after 5th of November 2024. Thank you. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Mahapatra. As usual, you have lived up to your reputation. And now I will turn to Captain Dr. Bansal. With your background, you will also recollect Lieutenant General McMaster, who was National Security Advisor. And he is a veteran of the Gulf War or Iraq War. And in his book, what he has said about Donald Trump's White House office, this used to be the committees and psychophancy. And one thing that I did not mention, I have written letters, all of our panelists may kindly confine to 10 minutes. That's very important. Secondly, I did not say that India is in such envious position. Many world leaders must be waiting with anxiety to become president. We are fortunate we have Prime Minister who has developed his own art to generate bonhomie, warmth, and personal chemistry, whether it is Obama, whether it is Donald Trump, whether it is Joe Biden, and maybe Kamala Harris. So we can relax. What we have seen has happened in last 2 days and the bilateral at Delaware. We can see that our relations will grow. Over to you, Captain Bansal.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for inviting me for this discussion. And I don't claim any expertise on US, but since you have asked me, let me start with it. The first question that you have asked is, who is likely to win the US presidential election? And as Professor Chintamani Mahapatra has actually pontificated, US elections is a complicated scenario. Although as early as 1896, the person who won the most votes was actually not elected, and R.B. Hayes was elected rather than Samuel Tilden, despite wearing. And this has happened again and again. Of course, we had during George Bush's time again, and then, of course, during Hillary Clinton's time. Will Kamala Harris become the president, or will Donald Trump become the president? I'm just reminded in 2016, when all opinion polls were showing that Hillary Clinton is winning, and I was with a US based analyst who works on India very often. And I said that it seems Hillary is winning, but she said US is a misogynistic society. She will not win. And eventually her words came true. Now, what is the situation today in 2024? Is it again a misogynistic society which will not allow a lady to win? We need to think about it. And as Professor Mahapatra said, though I was actually going through the data from 1960 to 2024, there's hardly any state which has voted for one party consistently. Even California in between has actually gone to Republicans. So we can't say that, yes, they are. But if you take last few elections, I think since 1984 onwards, there is a very clear-cut bifurcation. You can see which are the blue states, which are the red states. And as everybody in US is today forecasting that eventually the decision as to who will become president will depend on 7 states of Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. According to the latest CBS poll, Kamala Harris seems to be leading. So as I said, as somebody had said, and Christine Fair was the lady, a well-known analyst in India, who said that US society is misogynistic. So first question that comes to mind is US today prepared to accept a lady president, and that too from a mixed Indian African descent? To my mind, the answer is 2024 is not 2016. And I think, unlike Professor Mahapatra, I would stick my neck out to say that I expect Kamala Harris to win. And I expect that in November, when the results come out, you will see Kamala Harris as the President of the United States. And this I'm saying because, unlike in 2016, Donald Trump is far more a polarizing figure today than he was in 2016. And this would actually polarize voters to come. And in fact, you would see that anybody who is worried about Donald Trump coming to power would probably vote for Kamala Harris. More importantly, in many of the swing states, just to give you an example of Arizona, there has been a huge migration, and migration has been of minorities. In fact, like Hispanics have moved into Arizona very strongly. And Arizona was the state actually which ensured that Trump was defeated in last elections. In fact, it was Arizona's turnover which actually eventually sealed Trump's fate. So Arizona, as of now, I think we can see there is a Hispanics movement move into Arizona. The population percentage is rising. Many of these swing states, you can see that the people of color, people of other ethnicities are moving in. Also, I think after what happened in 2020, the attack on Capitol Hill, etc., most moderates are, I think, moving away from Trump. This is not to say that Trump doesn't have a diehard supporters. As Professor Mahapatra says, Trump has a band of very, very committed supporters who will do anything for him no matter what happens. But I personally feel that because of this polarization, I visualize that Kamala Harris should win. I'm no cephalologist who can say with conviction, but at the moment, I feel Kamala Harris stands a much better chance, despite being a lady, despite being from a ethnicity which is not white. She stands a better chance than Donald Trump. Having said that, I think the second question was, how does it impact India-US relations? I have still got 3 more minutes, sir, according to your time. So I just take 3 more minutes and delve onto it. See, now, a lot of people in India support Donald Trump because they feel that Donald Trump is anti-Pakistan, he's anti-China, so he's necessarily pro-India. He's actually made some statements about Prime Minister Modi, Howdy Modi, etc. happened. So people feel that there is a natural affinity. Unfortunately, Trump has never been consistent. So you really can never plan anything with Trump. One day he'll make one statement, the next day he'll make another statement. Depends on which side of the bed he gets up. So actually planning Indo-US relations on a Trump presidency is actually a difficult proposition to my mind, because he neither trusts his advisors. You can see the amount of secretaries of states that he sacked during his 4-year tenure, the amount of people, his key personnel who were with him, the way they have been sacked. I think it would be a record for, I think, any US president, the number of people who he sacked from his own administration. So that's one big problem. Though, of course, there is no doubt if Trump comes to power, we will have a big advantage. That Indian initiative of trying to broker peace between Russia and Ukraine has a far greater chance of fruition under Trump presidency than any other presidency. I think that would work out. There could be more pressure on Pakistan, but Trump could hit on immigration. And our tech graduates who are actually migrating to US and the huge remittances that we are getting might be impacted if Trump comes back to power. On the other hand, Kamala Harris, because of her liberal background, is bound to raise questions on Kashmir and many other human rights issues that she keeps raising from time to time. So that's going to be a problem. But at least with the Democrat presidency, we could see that there is likely to be a consistency of policy. She is likely to be driven more by advice given by her advisors than Trump, who might take a decision contrary to what his advisors say. So that's one advantage that we have. And the second, we need to understand that with a Democrat presidency, I think you will see that immigration or movement of people would continue. There won't be trade embargoes like recently Trump said that India uses unfair trade practices. So this, to my mind, sums up. To my mind, irrespective of who comes to power, India-US relations will continue to thrive. Firstly, because there is a bipartisan consensus that India is important. Secondly, India-US relations are not driven by common interests, but by common values. The common values of democracy and pluralism that will continue to guide us. And finally, the rising of Indian diaspora bolsters India-US relations. So irrespective of who comes to power, this is going to be India and US are bound to come closer because diaspora is rising and diaspora is powerful. A lot of people say that Kamala did not talk about anything about India. The fact is she has been coming to India. She need not say anything about her Indian connection in an election where Indian voters are relatively small. I think it makes sense. But obviously, she has Indian blood in her. She has Indian relatives. So she would have some Indian soft corner in her. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Captain Bansal. You have stuck your neck out, and if you are proved right, you might get invitation from President Kamala Harris for the first ball after the election results are out. Now I will turn to Arun, Ambassador Arun Kumar Singh. You have heard an academic and the head of the think tank with military background. You have also heard some of the questions which they have raised, and Captain Bansal talked about impact on India, but in my question, I have also impact on the rest of the world. So you can, with your own personal experience and give your opinion on all, whatever you can compress in 10 minutes. Over to you.
Thank you, sir. So thank you for the opportunity, and also want to thank Professor Mahapatra and Captain Alok Bansal for their very detailed comments. I broadly agree with much of what they have said. So let me just add a few elements. First, I think we all agree that the elections remain unpredictable as of now. Way back in 2016, when it was the Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump, I had gone both to the Republican and Democratic conventions that year. And at the Republican convention, senior Republicans were saying that it was so unfortunate that they were nominating the one person who could lose to a Hillary Clinton, but they were so happy that the Democrats were going to nominate the one person who could lose to a Donald Trump. So that was the situation there. And in the run-up to the elections, till the middle of October, the sense was that Hillary Clinton was going to win. But it was at that stage that the FBI director, Comey, revived the inquiry against her use of the private email server. And that started turning the mood. But even then, on the night of the election, there was an expectation in the Democratic camp that Hillary Clinton would win, and she did not give a concession speech, as is normal, the night of the elections, but the next day. Similarly, in 2020, if you remember, the initial votes were going in favor of Donald Trump, as the results from the states came in, and that was expected because the red state results were coming out first. And Biden had to come out and speak to his supporters in the middle of the night and say, don't lose hope. The ones we are expected to win, those results are on the way. And eventually he won. So we should be prepared for an element of uncertainty. But again, as has been suggested, I don't think we should really worry about who's going to win. We should be able to have broadly a positive relationship with its own particular set of challenges, whoever wins. And I think our focus should be that between the elections in November and the new president taking over in January, how do we try and impact on the transition process? Because in the US, it's a very elaborate transition process. Soon after the new president is elected, the teams get in and start the process of taking over from the outgoing administration. And although the new president really takes over around the 20th of January. And India had been able to impact this transition process, both in the Bush-Obama transition and then in the Obama-Trump transition. President Bush had been very popular with the Indian policymakers because he had done the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement. But there was uncertainty about where President Obama would stand, because in the Senate, he had moved amendments which had effectively killed the Civil Nuclear Agreement. In an interview to Time magazine in October 2008, he said that he was thinking in terms of appointing a special envoy on Jammu and Kashmir, and maybe Bill Clinton could be that envoy. But the transition process was used to, by both sides to sensitize the incoming administration. And eventually, he said that the Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement was settled law, and he would advance the process on that basis. And that, he was not going to appoint a special envoy to deal with India, Pakistan, or Jammu and Kashmir, and it was kept out of the remit of Richard Holbrooke, who was the special envoy for Afghanistan, Pakistan. And similarly, during the Obama to Trump transition, an important argument was made out because Trump was very critical of allies and partners for misusing the US, exploiting the US. So the argument was made out that, look, India is not an ally. And you're not spending money on India. You don't have bases, you're not spending money, and India is not asking for money. What India is saying, let's partner in trade, let's partner in technology so that we both benefit. And I think that kind of argument appealed to a transactional person like Donald Trump. So given that, I think we should broadly be okay, whoever wins. Captain Bansal has described some of the challenges that could be there. But if it is, let's say, a Kamala Harris presidency, if we look at what has happened in the Biden-Harris administration, there has been transformational changes brought about in the India-US relationship. One of the very important initiatives has been this initiative on critical and emerging technologies, a partnership in artificial intelligence, quantum, cyber, 6G, biotech, defense, semiconductor, space. And when US launched this partnership with India in January 2023, they had not done that with any other country. And in fact, they did later with South Korea a similar agreement, but that was in December 2023. And in that agreement, there is a para saying that India, US, and South Korea will now do a trilateral cooperation on critical and emerging technologies. And once US had done that, many of the US partners wanted to do a similar agreement with India. You may have seen that in July this year, the UK has done with India something called the Technology Security Initiative, which is patterned entirely along the lines of the US-India Civil Nuclear Cooperation Agreement. So based on the Critical and Emerging Technology Agreement, so based on that, if you see the outcomes that have just come out of the Prime Minister's visit to the US, very important decisions in the area of semiconductors, very important decisions in doing more R&D together, very important decisions in terms of a semiconductor fab coming up in India, which would supply for the requirements of the US Defense Forces, US Space Force. And of course, it would also be available for India. So I think broadly in terms of technology partnerships, in terms of defense cooperation, because another initiative of the Biden administration was the IndusX, India-US Defense Acceleration Ecosystem, where they brought in defense startups between the two countries to look at co-development of technology. And they've done joint challenges, joint awards have been done. And again, if you look at the, India wants to build up a defense industrial base here. And our defense exports have gone up. But according to a 2024 report of the American Chamber of Commerce here, 50% of our defense exports in the last 5 years have been through the global value chain of US companies. So that again shows the importance that is there in terms of cooperation in the defense industrial base. And recently there have been announcements of teaming agreements to set up MROs in India. So broadly, I think in technological cooperation, in defense cooperation, in some of the plurilateral arrangements, such as Artemis Accord for space, the Mineral Security Partnership. India has become a member now of the Mineral Security Partnership to look at a secure supply chain for critical minerals, which are vital for renewable energy, vital for aerospace and defense, because otherwise China dominates the processing and the mining in these areas. And if you look at the 15 members here, it's US, Canada, 8 countries in Europe and the EU, and Japan, ROK, Australia, and now India. So again, that is showing the kind of partnerships that are developing. We've had the I2, U2, India, US, UAE, and Israel for food security, energy, renewable energy partnerships, and the India, Middle East, Europe corridor. So that would continue. Now, under Donald Trump, again, because Trump has remained focused on the China challenge, and US has said repeatedly that although Russia is an immediate challenge, they see China as their primary long-term economic, technological, and military challenge, and the only country with the intent and capability to try to replace the US in the international system. And it was Donald Trump in his presidency that had brought the China challenge up front, because China had sucked away manufacturing from India, from the United States. So given that, and one can expect that the importance of the relationship with India will be emphasized, because today when the US sees the challenge from China, they see India, another country of 1.4 billion people, with availability of required human skilled capital, as very important for the US to maintain its global edge in innovation. Today, there are more than 1,600 global capability centers in India. 60% of them are the global capabilities of US companies supporting their global operations, not just their operations in India. And many of them are doing cutting-edge R&D and technology development work. In fact, it has been said that 20% of engineers globally in semiconductor design are based in India. And one of the US companies, for example, which has advanced jet engine technology, and we don't have jet engine technology, employs 6,000 people in Bengaluru doing cutting-edge R&D and technology development work. So they realize that they have to maintain their edge vis-a-vis China. India has to be an important partner for them. So given that, I'm confident that there will be particular challenges, whoever wins, but broadly, the positive trajectory of the relationship will be sustained. Thank you.
Okay, Arun, for ending on this positive note, now I turn to Ambassador Meera Shankar. You have been in USA twice, earlier as minister, then later on as ambassador, and you have heard all the 3 speakers, and you have so many questions thrown at you. I hope you are not sticking your neck out like Captain Bansal and picking up one candidate. But give your idea what you think is going to happen. And as I said, we all seem to be at least in convergence that so far India is concerned, we can relax, but rest of the world can't relax. And we should not forget, so much emphasis Indo-Pacific. But it was Donald Trump who gave name Indo. It was Asian Pacific. He is the one who really revived or realized this Indo-Pacific. Quad was lying in limbo for years. Over to you.
Okay. So first of all, thank you, Surinder, for having me. And thank you to all the previous speakers who have gone ahead, who've brought out some very interesting insights into the presidential process and election process and, potential outcomes. Of course, America is as confused as we are about their election, because different polls predict different outcomes. The momentum certainly is with Kamala, because she has not only made up the gap between Biden and Trump, which was quite wide, but is also shown as being ahead in the averages of polls, because individual polls can tilt towards one party or the other. But here again, there are two polls which average all the polls. One is showing her ahead by 2.9%. The other latest polls are showing her ahead by 3 to 5%. But in the swing states, the 7 swing states which are going to determine the outcome of the elections, it's either tied or the margins are neck and neck. Trump is seen as ahead in Georgia and in Arizona, Kamala possibly, and it switches back and forth, in the rest of the 5 states, but only by around 1% or so. And sometimes it's tied. So it's very difficult to predict what the outcome would be, beyond saying that there is this momentum which Kamala seems to have, whereas Trump, who had this solid, 45, 46% support of his traditional constituency, has not really been able to increase that constituency by appealing to the middle of the road voter. He is still talking to those who believe in that, Make America Great Again constituency. Kamala has tried to nuance her position. She's finessed the issue of fracking in Pennsylvania, where earlier she said she won't allow, she was against it. Now she's saying she will not ban it, but will look at diversifying alternative sources of energy, and on immigration, where she's taking a tougher line and saying that she will also reintroduce the bill, which was a bipartisan bill, which would have moved by President Biden, which would have given more money to the law enforcement agencies at the border, and also more money for trying political asylum cases quickly and reaching decisions. So the other advantage is that in the last 6 months, immigration has come down, but it is clearly a hot potato, and it is the key issue that Trump is putting forward. America is not the same because we are being overrun by immigrants. Whether his stories about immigrants eating dogs, cats, or pets are true or not, the fact is that they evoke this subliminal fear of being overrun by people from outside, particularly dark-skinned foreigners. So there's a subliminal message to race as well. Kamala appeals to women, the abortion platform. She has nuanced her position because it's not sure unless she gets both houses, the House of Representatives and Senate as well, whether she will be able to actually overturn the Supreme Court decision reversing Roe v. Wade and reinstate abortion rights for women. So she said, if the US Congress passes a law to reinstate abortion rights for women, I will immediately sign it into law. So, it's a question of putting a contingency there. Trump has tried to finesse his position on abortion by saying he's not for a ban on all abortions. He will leave it to the states. And this is because 19% of Republican women who are registered as Republicans, have shown themselves as undecided whether to vote for Trump or not. On the economy, they have two different visions. Trump wants to continue with the tax cuts that he had introduced in 2017, expand them. These did not embrace the lowest wage earners. There were no tax cuts for them, though the higher income wage earners had benefited from these tax cuts. Kamala Harris wants to increase taxes corporate taxes, capital gains tax, and income tax for Americans earning more than $400,000. So she will not touch the middle class, lower middle class, and low income wage earners, but will seek to fund her program through increasing taxes. She is looking at creating what she calls an opportunity economy, which will assist low middle class people through child tax credits, through tax credits for small businesses, and through tax credits for every child that a family has below a certain income. So she is trying to put more money in the hands of the lower middle class and the low income wage earners. One of the issues that Trump criticizes her on and Biden on is the economy. But if you look at how the economy performed during Trump's presidency and Biden's presidency, roughly on par, though most economists give Biden high marks for having managed inflation, which at the peak had touched 9%, is now down to 2.5%. And having at the same time avoided a recession, because the conventional wisdom was that you couldn't do both, that if you tightened interest rates, then you were bound to go into recession. They still have growth. Unemployment has been low, but the one pain point for people has been inflation, which has come down, but still it's a pain point because it had also increased the mortgage payments that people have to make on their houses. On climate change, there would be broadly different policies. Trump, I don't know if he will again walk out of the Paris climate change agreement. Last time he had done so. He certainly now is not talking about it, but is saying that he will give clearance for the oil pipelines and drilling in Alaska. He is a climate change denier. Kamala wants to fund more diverse sources of energy while finessing her position on fracking so that she doesn't affect people in Pennsylvania, which is a key swing state. So we don't know how the election is going to go. If you look at predictors in the US, then you have a gentleman, a data scientist called Thomas Miller, who works at Northwestern University, who says he's been making predictions and has been correct, within a few points in the last two elections at least. And he goes by the betting, he takes data from betting sites, which he says, where there are 30, 40,000 people participating, and it's much broader than the average poll. Then on the other side, you have the pollster Nate Silver, who's saying, get ready for the possibility of a Trump presidency. So even the predictions that are coming from pollsters are widely divergent. I think we'll have to wait and see. It can swing either way between now and the election date. But as I said, the momentum seems to be with Kamala, but still the majority that she has is very fragile. It's within the margin of error. Who are the constituencies that the two look at? Trump has his white rural constituency. You can see the constituencies are divided on the basis of gender and on the basis of race. Kamala has the support of a majority of Blacks, Hispanics, and women. Trump has the support of white males and some women who are not university educated. He has the support of rural and middle America. Kamala has the support of urban America, which is more diverse, and of the coastal regions, New York and California. we were talking earlier about Hillary, the polls were correct in terms of showing her having more popularity because she did get 3 million more votes than Trump nationally. But because of the Electoral College, she did not get more votes in the Electoral College because let's say her votes were in California or in New York, she will only get the number of Electoral College seats assigned to that state, not more. So in recent years, at least twice, when George Bush Jr. got elected and when Trump got elected, the election did not reflect the popular vote, but the outcome of the Electoral College, which was different to the popular vote. And that could be a possibility this time. I think you also have to get ready for turbulence, because if Kamala wins with a slender majority, Trump has already indicated that he is not going to accept the outcome. So there could be the usual shenanigans, even in that debate that they had, he refused to apologize for what happened in his, on January 21. And again, he, whether he will accept the outcome of the election, he hedged his position. Now, for India, I think both will support the relationship with India because the relationship has been built across Republican and Democratic administrations, just as in India, it has been built across Congress and BJP administrations. So broadly, the mainstream parties support, but there will be differences in nuance. Trump will be more protectionist. He will impose a tariff of 10 to 20% on all imports from across the world, which would include India. And, the reliability of his commitment to dealing with China in an institutional and considered manner would be a question. He may also have some hesitation about some of the collaboration agreements between India and the US to develop and manufacture in India, because last time round he said, what are we doing, sending all this to be, developed in India? We should be only exporting to them. So it's not that he will pull back, but it raises a doubt as to the strength of his commitment on these issues. But broadly, the relationship will continue to enjoy US consensus for building the strategic partnership.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Meera. We have heard all 4 speakers, and only one thing we all agree is we don't know who will be president till last minute. A round of applause virtually to all the participants, our distinguished panelists who spoken. Now I see in the attendees we have DG of IDSA, Ambassador Sujan Chinoy. Are you there? Sujan, are you there? I saw his name, maybe he might have gone. I also see their Ambassador Venkatesh Verma. Captain Bansal said that if Donald Trump comes, then our mediating role between Russia and Ukraine might be easier. Venkatesh, do you share this optimism? Out attendees.
So first of all, I think we've had some excellent presentations today. I think the quality of the analysis was really outstanding, and thank you for organizing this. So,
response to the question, yeah.
So, of course, most of the analysis has been on domestic issues, but foreign policy will impact very much the possibilities there. The election is still open also on the foreign...
I asked you a specific question. Captain Bansal said if Trump comes back, then India's possibility of playing a mediator role between Russia and Ukraine might be easier. I want your specific comment on that question.
Sir, unfortunately, no. Trump will want to do the deal himself. Why would he want to share the limelight with anybody else? So it is unlikely that there will be a quick breakthrough if Trump comes in. He will try, but you saw what happened with North Korea. Reality will assert itself. But sir, there are a number of flashpoints across the world, and these flashpoints can actually impact the election itself. It's not the US democratic process is not insulated from these international events. Russia, Ukraine being one of them. If we have a sudden collapse of the Ukrainian army, one possibility, or if there's a major escalation in conflict between Russia and the West, with some of the European countries, that too will impact on the American election. So, but thank you.
Okay, now you can also ask questions to the panelists if you want to. Okay, are there any questions from anybody among the attendees?
Surinder, I would like to say something on the foreign policy side, if I
Please,
may.
please go ahead, Meera, go ahead.
You know, on the Ukraine war, I don't think that there will be an opportunity for India to play peacemaker, but I think the possibility of Trump trying to end the war will be there, because he might reduce and eventually cut off aid to Ukraine, you know, because this is something he's been questioning from the beginning. So whether there is a negotiated solution, or, you know, there's a donor fatigue which sets in the US, and the US starts tapering off its assistance to Ukraine, irrespective of whether there is a peace deal or not. These are certainly two possibilities. People have talked about kind of Korea-like development, where you have a ceasefire line, which is as is, where is, and monitoring of that ceasefire line. Both sides pull back and create a demilitarized zone on either side of the line, but you have no solution, you know, so it's kind of a frozen conflict, but with no active war. On Gaza, Biden and Kamala Harris are trying ineffectively to pressurize Netanyahu into having a hostages deal and a ceasefire.
Really pressurizing? Honestly.
Well, to some extent, not to the point of stopping support for Israel, but they have been trying. But as far as Trump is concerned, he would probably give Israel a free hand to finish off Gaza, to finish off what they've started. So it could lead to a fairly dangerous situation in the Gulf, though in Ukraine, his policy may be more palatable from the Indian point of view. Internationally, he could trigger, as I said, a protectionist war, because everybody might engage in tit-for-tat tariffs. So it could slow down the global economy. And for India and the US, these new initiatives that President Biden and Prime Minister Modi have started on critical and emerging technologies, semiconductors, and so on, it's very important. And I do hope that better wisdom will prevail, because the establishment and businesses in the US are now getting invested in this. So that might have an influence in moderating Trump's general aversion to having, assisting in manufacturing overseas.
Okay, thank you. Now we still have time, so I invite all the remaining three panelists to air their views about the foreign policy of Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, especially with two countries in focus, China and Pakistan. So Arun, you go first, then Professor Mahapatra, then we end with Captain Bansal. Arun.
Thank you. So I'll just nuance a bit what has been said. I think it is generally understood that on Russia, Ukraine, certainly Donald Trump would not be as supportive of Ukraine, even to the limited extent that the present administration has been. But then we have to remember that in the first Trump presidency, Trump wanted to move more positively with Russia, but it was the US Congress that constrained his hand by passing the CATSA legislation, countering American adversaries through Sanctions Act. And in the first version of the CATSA legislation, there was no waiver provision also. It was only later that waiver provision at the specific advocacy done by the then US Defense Secretary, Jim Mattis, that it was brought in. And Trump did not veto that measure because he knew that he didn't have the votes to sustain the veto. So depending on the composition of the US Congress, what Trump can do on Russia or Ukraine could be challenged. Again, on the Israel and what's playing out in West Asia, I agree with Ambassador Shankar that Trump would be far more supportive of whatever Israel is doing. But the Jewish community in the US itself is divided. Very strong section of the Jewish community in the US has been doing advocacy that the kind of action that the Israeli government, which is seen as an extreme and right-wing government, is taking, and that it should be a different policy. And there are protests within Israel too. So we have to see that dimension play out. I think broadly on China, both will push for the continued competition. If you saw the debate that took place between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, one, of course, there was hardly much debate on foreign policy. And even on China, Donald Trump criticized the Biden administration, saying that you've only continued with the tariffs I have imposed. And Kamala Harris criticized him for not doing as many technology restrictions as the Biden administration has done. So clearly, it's a competition to be a little more tough on China. So one can expect that to continue. But again, as Captain Bansal had mentioned, Trump is unpredictable. And even while maintaining a tough stance on China, in his first term in January 2020, he did a limited trade agreement, phase one trade agreement with China, which China had no intention of seeing through. But Trump then wanted the optics to get the votes in the red state, the Midwest states, that he's actually doing a trade agreement by which China would buy more from there so that he gets more votes. And it was a strange optic of the president of the United States signing a limited phase one trade agreement with the vice premier of China. And in the present in the White House was the vice president and very senior cabinet official. So it was just a political ploy that was doing. So Trump will remain transactional. He will remain unpredictable. But broadly, the competitive challenge of China has been, and if you just saw the hot mic that got Biden this time, saying that what China is doing just tactic, their strategy is to sustain the competition with the US. So I think that's what the American system has broadly absorbed.
Thank you. Over to you, Professor Mahapatra.
No, Donald Trump has made 41 promises that he would do if he becomes the president. And he's repeated 200 times all those 41 things. Some of them are constitutionally not possible. Some of them will be challenged in the Congress. And some of them he will change his own position because he cannot just act on his own. There are elements outside the USA who will also have their own views and perception and approaches. Now, I think he said that if he becomes the president, 10 to 20% of tariff will be imposed on every goods or commodity entering the US. But in case of China, it can be 60 to 100%. So it may not be 60 to 100%, but I think that if he wins the election, it is going to be intensification of Sino-US economic Cold War, which is already going. Number two, if he somehow tries to sacrifice Ukraine and gives Russia the chance to occupy some of the areas like Donbass and Crimea, it is going to have a very dangerous impact on NATO and its continuity. Because Russia-Ukraine war is more important for Europe than for America. In Pennsylvania, there is one factory where $147 billion of commitment of supplying of weapons and ammunition to Ukraine, in those factories it is being manufactured. Only yesterday or day before yesterday, Zelensky visited those factories. Not a single rupee has gone to Ukraine. It's all there in the US itself. So who knows, he may try to prolong the war because it's going to benefit the US and Europeans will be kowtowing to the Americans. So it may be prolonged. He may not end the war the way he's saying. And if in case Putin is able to achieve his goal, it is going to send a very wrong signal to Taiwan. If that happens, the Japanese, Koreans, Australians will be trembling in their trousers about how this guy is going to behave as far as the alliance politics is concerned. So these are the areas we should think about it very seriously, how it is going to play out.
Thank you. Now over to you, Captain Bansal. Nobody has answered my question. How will Trump and Harris behave towards Pakistan? We have written so many books on Pakistan. So Captain Bansal, enlighten us on the differences between the two candidates if they reach the White House towards Pakistan.
Firstly, before I talk of Pakistan, I did not say that Trump will help us to resolve Russia-Ukraine war. I said if Trump becomes a president, our mediation efforts might get accelerated and might come to conclusion. I'm not trying to say because for getting a media headline, he is willing to sup with the North Korean dictator. He would go anywhere and grab the headline. So it's not that he would let you grab the headline. That fact must be very clear. So coming to Pakistan, I have no doubts that Trump, as you know, what he would do. Sometimes he'll get up in the morning and make a tweet against Pakistan, as he did during his previous presidency, probably got up from the wrong side. So if there is a Trump presidency, you will see greater pressure on Pakistan. He has some amount of latent Islamophobia, because you saw the way he imposed restrictions on certain immigrations from certain countries. So there is no doubt that if Trump becomes a president, you will see pressure on Pakistan increasing. Kamala Harris, on the other hand, will not be able to do so because of her so-called liberal background. She would not like to be looking at something. But then Pakistan has so many drawbacks, which I think even Democrats would want to bring out. Their religious freedom, their treatment of women, the way their democracy has been going. Like US has been so, earlier has been so critical of what was happening in Bangladesh, that they successfully staged a coup. But they have not said something about Pakistani democracy, which has actually been doing similar things, and actually the elections there have been equally flawed. So that's one of the issues which will probably come. But I think unlike Trump presidency, I think if Kamala Harris comes to power, we could see Gaza conflict coming to an end sooner or later. That's that I'm quite certain about. I think Netanyahu would not be able to continue with this endless war just to remain in power.
Let me add one point in 30 seconds.
Okay.
This is something unusual. Donald Trump has twice hinted that in case he would lose the election, he would not run for presidency in 2028. A personality like him normally would not say so, but he has done it twice. Thank you.
Anyway, thank you once again to all the panelists.
One thing on Pakistan, that it is now very low salience in US foreign policy. So I think, it's not a country which gets a great deal of priority.
But I think Pakistan, they can't dump. Pakistan has deep relations with Pentagon, and I think army, so long as they are running the country in Pakistan.
I think the main issue is, the availability of nuclear weapons, extremism, and the risk of nuclear or mass destruction, terrorism being very high in Pakistan. The US will remain engaged with Pakistan. It is not a high priority now.
Okay, thank you once again, all the panelists. I think we have aired our views, and they might find it is much more articulate than what you hear on the television channels. But you all can go there, participate, and get some clap there. Maybe once election results are out, then I will invite all of you again once to share your views, what happens with the concerned elected president of the United States. Thank you very much. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.